drew first blood.
Hey guys, got another book review for you. Just finished reading David Morrell's classic First Blood. I have never read the novelization of First Blood before, although First Blood is one of my favorite movies ever. My favorite Rambo movie, hands down, with I'd say Part 4 is a close second. And I've always been meaning to read this, and over the last few years, as I've been reading the Sob, Soldiers of Barabbas mercenary books, I've really wanted to read this too because it's in the same vein, and every time I do a Sobs review, I talk about how Sobs is a combination of Rambo, specifically First Blood, and the A-Team. So, gave this a read, and blown away. Seriously blown away. It's one of the best books I've ever read. And I'm as surprised as probably a lot of people out there are to hear that, because when you think of First Blood and you think of Rambo, you think of, and Rambo shooting and yelling, and there not being all that much depth and substance in the movies, aside from the first one, the fourth one, maybe the fifth one. But this is not, I would not consider this a novelization of the first movie. After reading this book, I don't really see the first movie as the movie version of this. I see the first movie as an early 80s adaption of this, I guess. But as I was reading this, the whole time I'm thinking, the pacing of this is so patient and immersive, and it's so grim, but not depressing. That's the important part. With Rambo Last Blood, I thought that movie was very grim and bleak and depressing. This is very dark and grim, really captures what it's like to be in a war and to never be able to finish that war, to be perpetually at war like Rambo is. And in the book, he's only called Rambo. He doesn't even have a first name. So he's even more larger than life seeming. But I thought this seemed like a current Netflix series. This would be absolutely perfect as a 2019 or a 2020 Netflix series, something like 8 or 9 or 10 episodes, allowing everything to just progress at a more patient pace. And I jotted down a couple of notes as I was reading the book that I didn't want to forget by the time I got to the end. One of the big things is that the book takes place shortly after the Vietnam War. So in the movie adaptation, it's about a decade or more after the Vietnam War. Rambo was in his 30s. He's not exactly a spring chicken, and his main adversary is Will Teasel, the sheriff, who is a bit older than him. In the book, he's fresh out of the Vietnam War, so Teasel always refers to him as the kid. And so I think that really makes the dynamic between Rambo and Teasel, which is great in the movie, but in the book, it's even better because you have a real clash of ages. Teasel just comes off as older, still a Korean War vet, but him going against this young sawed-off runt punk, Rambo, just constantly referring to him as a kid, it just seems to drive the generation gap between them even more. So an example of how the pace is slower in the book. In the movie, Rambo is traveling through town and Teasel picks him up, kicks him out, says, "Be on your way." Rambo's not going to take that, turns around, starts to walk right back into the town, and like minutes after the first pickup, Teasel is handcuffing him, taking him in. He's had enough of Rambo. That plays out over a much longer period of time in the book. Rambo's driven out of town twice. He's given 2 chances. He picks up some food. Teasel drops him off next to the road. He sits in a ditch. He eats his food. He mulls it over. He thinks about it, and he decides, I'm not going to take this anymore because this keeps happening to him. And that's really the biggest advantage of the book. Luckily, David Morrell is an amazing writer. Was and still is. And really was able to convey the thoughts not just of Rambo and Will Teasel as well. So I've always enjoyed reading novelizations of movies that I really enjoy because it's a way of getting in the character's head and understanding their motives a little bit more. If you ever wanted to really understand Rambo's motives and Teasel's motives a lot better, then this is the book for you. Although they are very different characters from the movie. In the movie, Rambo is a doe-eyed, he's a sympathetic character. And Teasel is just a piece of trash. In the book, they are right down the line. They are 50-50. And I'd say more often, Rambo is the one that leans towards being the monster than Teasel. Teasel's not the hero of the book for sure. He's not without his faults. But as I'm reading the book, I kept feeling like, well, he's given him a chance. Teasel, he's kind of overstepping his bounds, but he is sure being a lot more patient than that Teasel in the movie was. So that was my constant comparison, that the book Teasel is a more reasonable man. He's got a little bit more integrity, it seems, than the movie Teasel. And then you get a whole bunch of extra stuff, which again I say is why you need that Netflix series. One movie won't cut it. Teasel, in the movie, we don't know anything about his family life. In the book, we find out his wife left him, so he's struggling with that. He's in a bad place. And the old man who comes in with the dogs in the movie, who has a very, very small scene, is basically a father figure to Teasel, because Teasel's father died at a young age in a hunting accident. And he was raised by this old man with the dogs. So instead of just Rambo plowing through Teasel's men like in the movie, Rambo plows through Teasel's men in the book, and he really devastates him by going after this old man. And boy, does Rambo plow through these people. In the movie, one guy gets killed, and it's sort of ambiguous, like it wasn't an outright murder or a killing. It was Rambo trying to defend himself, and he throws a rock at a helicopter. The helicopter wobbles. It's very great. In the book, Rambo is a monster. He is the predator. Even right down to his escape. In the movie, he elbows a few guys, punches them, and he runs out of there. In the book, again, it's 2019 Netflix series, or a 2020 Netflix series. He slices a guy open, and it is gruesome. The description, you're not just getting the information of what's happening, but you're getting the information of almost how it feels. And it's really, really sickening. It's gruesome. And Rambo runs out of that cop shop stark naked. So again, like just on another level, more visceral, more raw, more intense. Rambo on a motorcycle, a motorbike, stark naked, driving off into the woods. So there are some similarities, but it's just really amped up. And I usually don't like it when they take a property that's rated a little less, and then they amp up the violence and all of the other stuff, the nudity and stuff. But this being the original one, it just felt so strange to me. Usually they're taking the original one and they're adding more grit to it. In this case, the original one was full of grit, true grit, and they cleaned it up for the movie version. And if you wanted to know more about Rambo's backstory, his time as a POW in Vietnam, we get flashes of how horrible it was in the movie, but they go into great detail. And by great, I don't mean wonderful. I mean like awful, just awful what the character goes through, not just in the POW camps, but to escape too. He just plumb lost his mind. That's what it cost him. So in the movie, it's more of he escaped and he went on to survive and live on. But reading all of that in the book, he never escaped. He never got out of that POW camp. He never got out of that mindset. And he definitely had some sort of psychological trauma and damage going through it. Some of the chapters are just magnificently written. Some of the best writing I've ever read, because Morrell is able to write Rambo in his bewildered state, and you don't understand what's going on, but you're getting glimpses like you are when you are actually bewildered. If anyone's ever been knocked goofy or really sick or just concussed or anything like that, I imagine that's exactly what writing Rambo's escape was from. He's in, he's out, he wakes up in a tree, he's got food tied around his neck in a bag, he doesn't know how it got there. So someone was helping him along, the locals, the villagers. But really, I'm glad that I was able to find out the backstory of all that. But it's also one of those things it's so dreadful, it's so awful. It's not exactly something that you'll probably ever go back and want to read again. And another big difference in the book is Colonel Samuel Trautman, who did not train Rambo. He is not the man who made Rambo in the book. He's the man who made the men who made Rambo. So he shows up. The dialogue is basically exactly the same. So if you love Colonel Trautman and you love his dialogue, if you love Richard Crenna's curt performance as Trautman, you can totally picture Crenna saying all of these lines in the book. But the major difference is that Trautman has come to get one of his boys that his team created. So he doesn't actually have a really personal relationship with Rambo. And they do talk to each other at one point through the radio, similar to how they do in the movie. But it's a totally different type of relationship. Rambo has a vague recollection of hearing his voice over the PA during training. So it's not a father-son relationship. It's more of really a boss-employee relationship. The chase through the forest is spectacular. All the stuff that Rambo does to evade not just the authorities, but then all of the civilians come in. They got to get a piece of the action. You know, they feel like this guy needs to pay for all of the police that he's massacred. He kills so many cops in this book, and that's another thing that really kind of pushes him away from being the hero. Still not a villain. The whole time you still feel, he's not really justified in killing all these police officers, especially when there's one police officer who Teasel punches in the face, knocks him goofy. So the guy's on the ground, he's helpless. Teasel turns around to try to help another cop, and then when he comes back to the guy on the ground, he's dead. And that's something that the movie Rambo would never do, I don't think. Just to off a helpless victim like that, unarmed, helpless victim. That really shows you how enraged the book Rambo is. He has had enough of being pushed. He's disgusted by this Will Teasel, and he's going to make him pay. And not just by killing Teasel, but it's like right out of The Punisher. He's going to make him suffer and kill him last. And that's Rambo's mission in the book, is not just to escape, but I'm going to kill you last. I'm going to take everything from you and kill you last. So that's also really not a super fun, entertaining, pulpy movie Rambo style of story to be following. This is a really gruesome revenge tale, and Teasel obviously wants revenge as well. He has this mental breakdown, and he gets some real major damage trying to escape Rambo. More great writing of Morrell describing Teasel's heart condition. This guy could drop dead of a heart attack at any time, and it's so immersive that I think the reader just starts to feel a little woozy and dizzy and weak reading this stuff. And they're both being pushed to their limits. Teasel has, the trauma of trying to escape Rambo. Rambo has similar physical damage that he sustains in the movie, falling through a tree and breaking ribs, and he's dying the whole book, basically. Even though he's trying to run, he's trying to escape and survive, he's dying. We're constantly reminded he's bleeding, he has pain, he's disoriented. All that on top of the physical trauma of being a POW, prisoner of war. So it's an incredible collision course of two guys on almost a parallel path going through the same thing. It's not like the movie where you got Teasel in his nice cozy jacket and his army behind him, and Rambo all by himself out in the forest all cold. Like, this really feels like you want to see these two collide, and you want to see what the outcome is going to be. And I wasn't necessarily cheering for either guy. The ending, I don't know if I want to spoil it for you, because it's so powerful. It's one of the few books that just, when I was done, I closed the book slowly, and I went, wow. And my wife was reading a book next to me, and I told her, you will not believe what the novel First Blood ends like. I wish I could just go into it and say this and that, but it's really amazing. It's powerful. It's so much more than you hurt me and I want to kill you. It gets, I don't know if existential is the word, but as these guys are, I'll give you this much just so you know where it's going. as these guys are departing their mortal coils, it starts to get really existential and starts to really put things in perspective. And I like to try to always put things in perspective, not let first world problems get to me. And the thing that both of them arrive at, the truth, the fact that they both arrive at in the end, is that all of this was for nothing. All of it was for nothing. It was all so silly. And what was particularly powerful for me is Will Teasel's need, his absolute drive to be there at the end with Rambo, and not because of revenge. He is a character who just does like an incredible arc. Nothing like the movie. And I just was really touched at Teasel's. He didn't even come full circle. He kind of overshot it, and he went into a realm that he's really never been in, I don't think. It might sound really weird. It might sound impossible to believe that I'm talking about, a Rambo book that talks about this stuff. But the power of love, that's what I thought this was all about. So I know that gives away probably quite a bit, but I think not giving specifics here and just kind of trying to give you the spirit or the feeling, the essence of what this thing is about, that it's not about a guy, running off into the sunset covered in blood and saying, yeah, he paid for it, which is what Last Blood I thought was all about. This is more about going through a really difficult experience and learning something about another person so much that you are not just empathizing with them, but you become them. You become each other. There's like a symbiotic relationship that forms. And I have not seen that very often in movies where you've got the arch nemesis, the two nemeses battling each other to the point where they respect each other. To bring up a toy example, in some Transformers comics, Megatron sort of gets to that point where after Prime is gone, he misses him. Batman and the Joker always talking about how we need each other. You complete me. So if you like those types of stories, something that's a little more substance, a little more depth than just me good guy, fight you bad guy, might be really hard for you to believe this, but First Blood, a novel that was written all those years ago. First printing was 1972. Man, does it ever hold up. And I really, really hope that this gets faithfully adapted, not into a movie, but into a series, a mini-series, so that it has the proper time to breathe, and also with the proper actors too, because this story it would be all about the performances in order to do the writing and the dialogue and the feeling justice. So I'm just going to close on saying, if this were to be done properly, this book in series form, I love the cast of First Blood. Dennehy, Stallone, and Crenna were fantastic in the movie that they were in the script that they used. So they changed this, they changed that. They made a very entertaining movie. It's not First Blood, the novel, not at all, but it's still an entertaining movie. If they were to do that series based faithfully on this, I'd say for that time period, if that series came out then, you'd need powerhouse actors. So nothing against the actors they use, but I'm talking like Marlon Brando as Teasel. I'm talking Charlton Heston as Colonel Trautman, and for Rambo, you'd need someone. I can't think of a young guy who was at the peak of the acting profession at that point, but someone like a youthful Daniel Day-Lewis at the time, to do a little bit of, if you could time travel actors, or, even, I don't know, maybe like a Heath Ledger or something like that. Like, you'd need Oscar caliber actors to do this stuff, because the potential is there for this to be not just a really powerful, moving book, but a series too. So if you're a Rambo fan, I highly recommend it, with the warning that this isn't a Rambo story. I mean, what's really cool about it is that Rambo came from this. but it's so much more than that. It does so much more than fill in the holes that the movies have left. And for me, what a wonderful way to kind of close the whole Rambo saga. Went into Last Blood thinking that would be the closure of Rambo. Wasn't really satisfied with that as the final chapter of Rambo. So sometimes you got to go back to the beginning. So glad I did, because this is the ultimate Rambo story in my opinion. If you've read the First Blood novel, form a thought in the comment spot. And to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmas Day.